of the Catch Wrestling Alliance. I'm here to help keep real wrestling alive. That's always been our goal. And so I really appreciate everyone's support in helping me and all the people that I work with to keep real wrestling alive. So we have a really interesting story, but let's go ahead and get some like announcements out of the way. So you might have seen on our social media that I will be starting to teach at UCLA. So I currently teach at Fight Science MMA. So that shouldn't change because it's a totally different time than the UCLA class. So the UCLA class will be held at the John Wooden Center on campus, and that should be Monday, Wednesday around like 5. I think on 5 or 6. Yeah, so that's the thing. So I think on Monday it's like 6 p.m. and then on Wednesday it's at 5 p.m. For some reason they switched it up like that, where because they want me to teach 2 classes, so they want me to teach catch wrestling and then sanda. So that's Chinese kickboxing, but they don't keep the time the same. So it's like on Monday I'll teach sanda at 5, and then catch wrestling at 6, and then Wednesday I believe it's catch wrestling at 5, and then sanda at 6. So anyway, with that being said, people are already asking. Yes, you do have to be a member of their gym, right? So that means it's open to the public, right? So you can join the gym. It should be cheaper than joining like any other kind of workout gym, pretty much anywhere in Los Angeles, because it's a public university, so it should be cheaper. And then you can register for the class, and so that's how that works. All right, so that's going to be starting next month at the John Wooden Center at UCLA on UCLA campus. So hopefully, if anybody's around, you can totally join, and it'd be great to meet you. So yeah, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask in the chat and all that, and then we'll try to I'll try to answer all your questions. Okay, so uh, catch wrestling just destroys everybody in the in the gym, or like in the what's it called, on the street, right? So let's go and try to pull this up here. So it was brought to my attention by actually Robbie Burrows. So he's one of our big fans. He's a huge fan of authentic catch wrestling. He he actually I've brought him on to interview him because he's kind of like an amateur historian, an amateur catch wrestling historian. He lives in England, and I really appreciate him. Like, he sent me this video. It's already about a year old. It's from Ummah Fight Camp. So they are a channel here on YouTube. So if anybody's watching on Twitch or whatever, just I'm going to put the link in the show notes to their YouTube channel. So this is a martial artist who has a lot of really cool commentary and a really cool perspective. And so on his channel, he has a lot of talks, kind of similar to what I do, but he talks about different martial arts. And so in one case, I think he gets it right. So in one video that was that Robbie sent to me, he talks about fighting on the street and who would win between wrestling and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And what's really cool is like he talks about or he knows that there's a difference between amateur wrestling, so the scholastic, or like what we call like the folk style, and freestyle, and catch wrestling. So might as well share the first clip. I got 2 clips for you. Okay, so here we go. Clip number 1 from Ummah Fight Camp.
BJJ and wrestling. And understand, I'm not talking about catch wrestling. I'm talking about collegiate wrestling, academic wrestling, high school, college, right? I'm not talking about catch wrestling. Catch wrestling and BJJ, heads up, they go at each other. Hard to say who would win, okay? I would take catch wrestling in that case, all right? Why? Because they cut out a lot of wasted motion, okay? But we're not talking about that. We're talking about the wrestling that wrestlers have in the cage, okay? Wrestlers, the collegiate wrestling, okay? Who wins in a street fight, BJJ and wrestling?
All right, so so it shows that he already knows the difference, right? So there is a huge difference, even though scholastic, or what we call folk style, the style that is done here. So for people here in the United States, where I live, right? So there are many people who live in other countries, and it's kind of funny. In one of our events, we had a Canadian, and I think one of them was interviewed, after their match, and they seem, or they tried to act like they knew what folk style was, but based off what they were saying, it's obvious that they didn't realize there's actually something different. And so yeah, like basically. Um, this is pretty much the United States is the only country that really does folk style, and the rest of the world does freestyle because that's what's in the Olympics. But anyway, they both come from catch wrestling, so their roots are in catch wrestling. But over the decades, so now it's going to be about a century, right? But basically, over the many decades, um, they've like gone further and further away from their catch wrestling roots. So submission holds are barred, and even in some of the earlier pictures of the collegiate folk style wrestling or the collegiate wrestling, you see them still using the double wrist lock and other wrestling holds or catch wrestling holds that are now deemed like too dangerous or whatever. So there's that. And then let's go ahead and get back to the second clip from Ummah Fight Camp, where his discussion in that video is that like what would win in a fight, whether it's wrestling or jujitsu. So let's go ahead and see his reasons why, or what he chooses and his reasons why.
Hypothetically, they don't know how to strike, like some fantasy thing. They just don't know how to strike, period. But there are no rules. Then you know what I'm talking about. And that's what I'm talking about. In the street, a street fight, neither one knows how to strike at all. They know what it means to strike. They can't punch for some reason. They just can't. All right, some fantasy fight. If all the person has is BJJ and all the person has is collegiate wrestling or academic wrestling, what you see in high school and college, BJJ wins. BJJ wins. The reason is this. The things that wrestling is strong in, that makes a king in a cage, would not suffice in the street. I'm going to repeat. The things that makes wrestling king of the cage, right, and complements punching, it makes a king of the cage against grappling, against BJJ, would not suffice in the street, would not be enough in the street. If there is no punching whatsoever, neither one knows how to punch, but it is a fight to the death, on the average, BJJ would win. Reason being is because while wrestling knows how to pin, wrestling drives through for takedowns, and their takedowns will always be superior to BJJ, no gi. Will always be even superior to judo in some ways, no gi. Maybe out of the 11 or so takedowns of Kodokan Judo, I would say no gi, 4 of them are best. Okay, some of the other ones kind of compromise your own positioning in a street fight. However, when we talk about BJJ and collegiate wrestling, NCAA wrestling type, okay, freestyle wrestling, BJJ wins because, as I've said, wrestling, skills of pinning, skills of riding, takedowns, no chokes, no breakings. Not taught to break your limbs, not taught to choke, not taught to strangle, okay? Because of that, BJJ would win, in my opinion, a fight to the death against the average wrestler of the same experience.
All right. Okay. So did you hear that? Fight to the death. And I agree. And I think this is one of the things that we've been talking about over many of the live streams where, we do have this difference, right? So catch wrestling does have submission holds. They do have chokes, right? So, but it was just one of the things that was not done in professional catch wrestling, but everyone was aware of it. There's all these old pictures. And the thing is, it's kind of funny because like they try to say like, oh, chokes are, like they're trying to make it seem like the chokes were never barred, and even though like all the old timers they don't do it. There's like a big interview with Earl Caddock, a world champion catch wrestler, talking about like if he sees, well, while he was training um, soldiers when he was in the army, they had him train soldiers. And he said the way to tell if someone is a novice at grappling is if they're trying to choke someone. So it just shows that we do know all these types of techniques, and but there's more to submitting someone or controlling someone than just choking them. But going back to what was said on the Ummah Fight Camp video is that um, there's all these things that are in wrestling, or at least we can think like um, all the things that he mentions about being in wrestling that make, how he said what makes wrestling the king of MMA, with all the riding and all the pinning and stuff like that. All those great things are also in catch wrestling. But so then the other point that he makes in his video is that beyond that, so in a street fight, that might not exactly get you the win, if you don't have that extra knowledge of the submission holds, right? So I totally agree with that point, especially if someone's really attacking you and maybe fighting to the death, like how he says, or someone's really attacking you. A lot of times, the legal or it, in these types of self-defense situations, a lot of times it's someone you might know, right, or someone who really hates you. So then they're really trying to kill you, because a lot of times, like someone who's just like trying to rob you or someone something like that, they don't care that much. They would just want an easy target, right? So someone's really fighting to the death and they really are trying to kill you, you might have to submit them, break a limb or something like that. um so just pinning someone, and this is, I kind of feel this way about arm bars, right? I think you definitely have to follow through with breaking the arm. Someone's not going to tap out in a real fight, but anyway, you would have to have that knowledge. So if you just pin somebody, you might not be able to keep them from like biting you or scratching you or whatever. The other caveat that Ummah Fight Camp puts in there is the whole thing about like, if it's kind of like the average grappler, where the average high level grappler, right, they really are proficient in their arts, but so they put all this time into their grappling art but not much time into striking. That's kind of what he's talking about. It's like they don't really actually, you kind of see it a lot in MMA, where it's like you see kind of this rudimentary uh, striking, or rudimentary ability with striking, and that's kind of what he's talking about. So like if you take that person where their main specialty is grappling, and put them in a fight to the death where they have rudimentary striking, uh, the catch wrestler should be able to come out on top. And I believe he mentions where he feels that the catch wrestling cuts out. Hopefully, I think that was hopefully that was in the first clip, because he says in that video that he feels that catch wrestling would get the edge because it takes out a lot of this extra movements that he feels are in Brazilian jiu-jitsu or in jiu-jitsu. So he would give the edge to the catch wrestler. And then he has to clarify that when he talks about wrestling, then he's talking about the freestyle and folk style, right? So I think that that's the unfortunate thing about wrestling, because it's like it's been so like the kids version, right, the freestyle folk style, or the amateur version or whatever, has been so elevated because of the absence of like its parent, right? So it's like the parent is there, and then the parent got removed because of for many reasons, but also professional wrestling, like the version that we have now of professional wrestling, the performance version, that overshadowed, or at least people think that is the professional version, whereas back in the day, in the heyday of catch wrestling, the professional version was a real contest, right? So um, so then without the parent there, then these other ones arose in prominence. But also too, because folk style, I mean, because freestyle is in the Olympics, so then a lot of people around the world, since around the world they do freestyle, people want to win that gold medal. or at least they want to compete for it. So then they're willing to abide by whatever rule set is in place. And then over the years, these rule sets, you know, make or they make the style evolve away from the original version. So further and further away from the original version. Yeah, so let's see. Oh, we got a lot of comments. Oh, Marcus James, literally on my way to catch class at Wigan now. Oh, hopefully you enjoy it. I really miss Coach Roy Wood. Hopefully he's there. Yeah, I think some of those people would know me, even though it's been a few years since I'd been back. I think I've met a bunch of them though already. All right, Tito Bandito. The eagle knows what's really good. It was a good old-fashioned neck crank, same used on the livestock or life or death situations. Fish hook and call it a day. um, yeah, actually, that was one of the things. Our three-quarter Nelson is considered something that was used to bring down like a horse, like if they needed to be examined by the veterinarian. So you can use that three-quarter Nelson hold and bring down a human can bring down a horse to make it lie down on its side, so the doctor can examine it. So that's the way the story goes. But it seems really possible because you actually get really good leverage with the three-quarter Nelson. Tito Bandito. BJJ does not exist. Grappling is grappling. The guy was splitting hairs and has no idea what he's talking about. On average, equates to regurgitated public opinion. There is no one style. I don't know. I don't think grappling is grappling. That's why we have these different styles. We have these different names. We have folk style, which again is and freestyle. So this is the point here where it's like um, you have these styles that are so far into sport that they can they can make you successful in an MMA situation, right? But what Ummah Fight Camp was talking about is in a fight to the death, right, or a street fight, right? So when you have a lot of the pinning, or at least like the wrestling principles, and then you have the submissions on top of that, then that is the winning combination. So grappling is not just grappling, is not all grappling, and this is the unfortunate thing because we're trying to talk about like keep real wrestling alive. Well, there is a real style to catch wrestling, and then so you can't just say that like, oh, just grappling is grappling, then like there's no difference, right, in these styles, which there is. Tactical Casey. All right. I think catch wrestling has a serious edge on the street because, at least in my opinion, there is little about a catch wrestling game plan that needs to be heavily adapted to an edged weapon scenario, right? So Tactical Casey actually works a lot with self-defense in Canada. So Tactical Casey would definitely be someone who's thought about this a lot, basically. So I totally agree, and I think this is the point of the original video where from Ummah Fight Camp, where they're talking about a street fight, right? So again, you don't necessarily want to be on your back because if you're on pavement, it's like it's not the best place to be, especially even if you have the rudimentary striking that Ummah Fight Camp was talking about. So like you don't want these hammer fists raining down from on top of you, right? If your head is like just above the pavement. And this is one of the things they're talking about with regards to brain damage in MMA, where it's like and this was the difference. So supposedly in boxing and kickboxing, you get less brain damage than in MMA because at least while you're standing and you get dazed right by a hit, or say if you get a really strong hit to your face goes backwards, right? And it doesn't hit anything because it's just air, right? Just air behind you. But in MMA, if you get knocked down and then someone's hammer fisting your face, then not only do you get the initial hit in front of your face, then your head goes back, right? And actually, I have the wall behind me, right? So you get that two hits. You get one hit, and then you get the second hit. Right, so this is what they're talking about. You get it's a twofer, right? So this is kind of what they're talking about um, with regards to the whole street fight thing. So even if there's like a rudimentary striking ability for both, you don't necessarily want to be the person receiving rudimentary striking from someone who's on top of you and keeping you pinned down. But then, so then what Ummah Fight Camp is talking about is that uh, if you are in that kind of situation against an amateur wrestler and you are a very skilled jiu-jitsu practitioner, you can probably still submit that person, right? So that would give you ultimately the edge over that person in a street fight because you can find a way to get the submission anyway. And this is one of the things, actually, I think we talked about it last week, where and so at the 10th Planet affiliate that I train at, I think last week I talked about where it's like I feel sad when when some of them talk about like or when I hear some of them talk about like, oh, this wrestler guy came in and rolled with us, and then I was still able to submit them, and it was like maybe like a blue belt guy talking about that, where it's like he still fell into my rubber guard or something. This is it's one of the things I've heard, but it's like it's sad, but I think that it proves the point, so that um, and we have plenty of great amateur wrestlers who wrestled for many years and getting submitted, and we have this. I think we talked about it even a few, like maybe a month ago, where Flow Grappling had a mini documentary that they came out where they document all the times that they've had events where they brought in some high profile amateur wrestler and like they get submitted so quick. Right. So it's wrestling is great, but there's like the amateur. I wish we had still had that distinction, right? So we can just call it amateur wrestling. Fantastic, right? But they're not cognizant of the submission holds, right? So it leaves them vulnerable, and I think that was the point from Ummah Fight Camp. Um, so hopefully, people kind of start discovering those differences because they're important, right? And that's what makes a style a style. So not all grappling is grappling because you're not learning all the same things. You're not learning the curriculum, right? All right, the lurker. Thankfully, my BJJ school is not sport oriented. If anything does come up that is sport oriented, it is called out, and we get warnings of it in street applications. Okay, yeah, that's cool. That sounds good. That you always want to remain cognizant of different things you can do. Um, yeah, I mean, so yeah, does your school do like regular like IBJJF tournaments, or is there anything? What kind of do you guys compete though? Because I think competition is still pretty good. Like I still did, like even last time I was in Singapore, I did a nogi IBJJF rules competition. So you can kind of adapt, um, but just for fun because you can kind of keep the rolling going, or you can roll for a long time. Um, yeah, so I'm interested in that. Because yeah, even in catch wrestling, you can kind of I think it's kind of funny because the sport itself, or like the style itself, is kind of a pretty rough sport where it's like you can totally neck crank and do all these other submissions that tend to be barred, at least for the lower belts. Leg locks are becoming more and more like allowed, or more and more legal in, especially in nogi. But at least in catch wrestling, I think when you go up against a better wrestler, or someone who's more experienced in catch wrestling, then the match can last longer. Just like the historic matches where they like it's really the best in the world going up against the best in the world, right? So then those matches would last about an hour or so or longer, right? So that sometimes when they're equally matched and they're both high level, then that's when stuff like that can occur. But also too, because of the rule where there's no time limit, then you can use the tactic of trying to wear down your opponent so that they can eventually become easier to move, right, or easier to maneuver, right, because you've fatigued them, right? Okay, the lurker responded, right? So sometimes, but not a fan of IBJJF and some of its rules. Yeah, so IBJJF in particular is like one of the most respected jiu-jitsu organizations in the world, but yeah, they have a lot of rules and crazy ways to win, right, or crazy ways to ensure that someone does win. So like even if the score is tied, if someone gets what's called an advantage, so maybe they're in a position that wouldn't necessarily get points, uh, if the referee or whatever, if whoever's scoring it thinks that the one person was still in a little bit more of an advantageous position, then they can get what's called an advantage. And so even though at the end of the match the score is tied, then someone can still win by advantage. Robot jocks. You should do videos for your pro wrestling WWE fans about how to defend yourself with a folding chair. Yeah, I think that'll be our next our next instructional video. Actually, maybe that'll be our next video course that we put out, or that we add to the advanced catch wrestling curriculum, right? um, yeah, that's the unfortunate thing. So even nowadays, where it's like people, if this hasn't only been my experience, but a lot of people, a lot of people have said that when they talk to people about like, oh, I do wrestling, then one of the first things people think about is folding chairs, right? Or stuff like that, falling through the table, or falling off the ladder to try to win that, what is it, the briefcase full of money or whatever. So um that was one of my points, where it's like you have the parent style completely being replaced by something that is not it, even though there's some aspects, right? And then you have the children styles, really gaining in popularity. And so then you get people thinking that, oh, real wrestling is not the WWE, but it's these other styles, these which were considered amateur styles. And they don't have the submission holds, but people heavily invest a lot of time. You can get a scholarship to some of our greatest schools, right? Some of these Ivy League schools, like was it Cornell, Stanford, and whatnot. So um, it's like, why not try, right? If you like grappling, why not try to get one of the scholarships to a great school? Because hey, why not? Right? um yeah, okay, so tactical Casey, toe holds with a folding chair, advanced class. Yeah, thank you, Casey. So yeah, I think maybe that's the next video. I'll write that down. I'll make sure to write that down, and then we'll make sure to put that all over YouTube and TikTok and everywhere, right? So and our Instagram, right? um Yeah. So anyway, let me know more of your thoughts about the videos here. I think maybe we can go ahead and just do a little recap for people who might just be joining now. So there's been it was actually an older video. I think it's about a year old, where the person at Ummah Fight Camp talks about who would win in a street fight between Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and wrestling, amateur wrestling. And what was really cool is that he made the distinction that he's not talking about catch wrestling, because catch wrestling would win, right? But against Jiu-Jitsu, against amateur wrestling, he believes that he believes that Jiu-Jitsu would win. So let's go ahead and run that clip again here.
BJJ and wrestling. And understand, I'm not talking about catch wrestling. I'm talking about collegiate wrestling, academic wrestling, high school, college, right? I'm not talking about catch wrestling. Catch wrestling and BJJ, heads up, they go at each other. Hard to say who would win, okay? I would take catch wrestling in that case, all right? Why? Because they cut out a lot of wasted motion, okay? But we're not talking about that. We're talking about the wrestling that wrestlers have in the cage. Okay? Wrestlers, the collegiate wrestling. Okay? Who wins in a street fight, BJJ and wrestling? All right.
Yeah, so I'm glad he makes that distinction. So it shows that he has a good understanding of martial arts and grappling in particular. And it's really cool that he gives us the edge, right? So, but that's the thing. I think, oh, yes, that's the other thing I wanted to bring up. So I think I did a screen grab of it because under that video, of course, there's a lot of comments. Let me see if I did a screen grab, a screenshot, because someone commented and then he replied. Oh, let me see where it is. Is catch wrestling better than BJJ in a street fight? So this is the comments under that video in particular that I'm showing you clips from. It says all grappling arts have fat, like quote unquote fat, that needs to be trimmed. Some catch moves are show moves that are not functional. So he gets it, right? I feel like he really understands the situation here where I talk about then we have the parent style and then we have the show style that pretty much just dominated and basically eradicated the original parent style. And then we have the Olympics, which elevated the amateur style. So then the parent style, right, is almost completely extinct, right? So, and this is so I really like that he mentioned like some catch moves are show moves that are not functional, right? So a lot of times what you might be seeing randomly around the internet where someone's saying like, oh, here's a catch wrestling move, and it's a show hold, right? I don't want to say anything more than that because like Ummah Fight Camp says it pretty clear. Some catch moves are show moves, quote unquote show moves that are not functional. We call them show holds, right? So show holds. Um, so stuff that might look cool in the show, right? But wouldn't necessarily win you a real competitive match, right? So that's what we're talking about. And I'm glad that Ummah Fight Camp knows about that. Unfortunately, before I just saw this video yesterday, so I didn't get a chance to reach out to Ummah Fight Camp to discuss it. But let's go ahead and show you or play for you his reason, his rationale.
Hypothetically, they don't know how to strike, like some fantasy thing. They just don't know how to strike, period. But there are no rules. Then you know what I'm talking about. And that's what I'm talking about. In the street, a street fight, neither one knows how to strike at all. They know what it means to strike. They can't punch for some reason. They just can't. All right, some fantasy fight. If all the person has is BJJ and all the person has is collegiate wrestling or academic wrestling, what you see in high school and college, BJJ wins. BJJ wins. The reason is this. The things that wrestling is strong in, that makes it king in a cage, would not suffice in the street. I'm going to repeat. The things that makes wrestling king of the cage, right, and complements punching, would not, it makes it king of the cage against grappling, against BJJ, would not suffice in the street, would not be enough in the street. If there is no punching whatsoever, neither one knows how to punch, but it is a fight to the death, on the average, BJJ would win. Reason being is because while wrestling knows how to pin, wrestling drives through for takedowns, and their takedowns will always be superior to BJJ, no gi. Will always be even superior to judo in some ways, no gi. Maybe out of the 11 or so takedowns of Kodokan Judo, I would say no gi, 4 of them are best. Okay, some of the other ones kind of compromise your own positioning in a street fight. However, when we talk about BJJ and collegiate wrestling, NCAA wrestling type, okay, freestyle wrestling, BJJ wins because, as I've said, wrestling, skills of pinning, skills of riding, takedowns, no chokes, no breakings, not taught to break your limbs, not taught to choke, not taught to strangle, okay? Because of that, BJJ would win, in my opinion, a fight to the death against the average wrestler of the same experience. And those.
All right. Okay. So hopefully his rationale, made it so you guys can kind of understand that point of view. I think it's pretty um, it's pretty straightforward. Tito Bandito, sport versus street. Really, just stop. You can stop watching this because there is a difference between sports and street stuff. Because again, they were talking about like there is a lot of damage you can incur even in MMA. Or we talked about like the two strikes, right? So if you're on the bottom face up and you get punched in the face, and your head goes back and hits the mat, so you still get that kind of like two impact damage to your brain. That is amplified if this happens on pavement, right? That's something that's less forgiving than the than the mat, right? Or like the cage, right? So the cage floor, it's still matted, or it still gives a little bit, right? So these are different things that are taken, or that he took into consideration. And this is his hypothetical, all right? So again, this is his opinion, and I'm glad he kind of feels really similar um, to our opinions, right? So, but the thing is, and this is the point that Tactical Casey brought up. So, catch wrestling in particular is easily translatable to self-defense situations. So, this is one of the reasons why originally it was one of the things that was taught to soldiers as well, because you can easily add like weapons training to the style itself. The catch wrestling starts standing and has a lot of more sophisticated like standing techniques and whatnot. So that's one of the things or one of the advantages that catch wrestling would have, where it can translate even with where he talks about like rudimentary striking, right? So even with rudimentary striking, you can still take care of yourself, right? Or you should have an advantage, right? So yeah, it shouldn't be. So like the lurker talks about, simple is better. And yes, that's the case, right? That is truly what you want to be doing. So a lot of times, if you, especially like, you see it in all martial art styles, where like if you see this kind of elaborate multi-step kind of counter technique or whatever, I kind of see it a lot in like self-defense videos, where it's like someone has a knife, and then they do a specific type of stab at someone, and then there's like this multi-step counter to it. So a lot of times those things aren't going to work, especially in a, like if you get attacked, because a lot of times it's like not going to be like I said earlier, it's like sometimes it can be a crime of passion, someone that just really hates you and wants to hurt you, and they're not necessarily going to come out was it like a movie where, oh, what was it that one with Eric, was it Eric Bana, and it was like Troy or something, where was it Brad Pitt is outside the gates of Troy calling for Hector or whatever. It says Achilles is yelling for Hector. It's a lot of times fights aren't like that, right? A lot of times things just happen suddenly, or things escalate suddenly, or so anyway, so you're not going to be so prepared. A lot of times you're going to be scared, even if you're even though you've practiced a lot, you spend a lot of time in the gym. So simple is better. And so practicing techniques for those types of situation would be different from what you usually practice in the gym, where you just drill and whatnot. You can drill a lot of techniques for self-defense, and so usually those ones are kind of refining what's called like a gross motor response, right? So someone tries to stab you in the belly, right? A lot of times, if you see it coming, you might react by like just kind of like moving a little bit. So you refine these types of movements, right? So it might sound weird, but you're not necessarily going to have some refined kind of like, oh, I'm going to block and eye gouge and do all these things. It might not happen because the scenario might come up too suddenly for you to have some kind of sophisticated response, right? So that's one of the things that's going on that you really have to take into consideration. You're not just going to be some like killer all the time, right? So yeah, so that's why these types of this, like the self-defense and what we call like street scenarios, uh also have to be like practiced as well, so that can be your response. All right, anybody else have other questions or comments? Ben Franklin, thank you for gracing us with, you know, coming back through time, right? To to grace us with your question, right? Let me go and plug in the. I forgot to plug in the computer here, so it's about to die. Okay. All right, Ben Franklin. How you train is how you fight. That covers mentality and what you're prepared for. Uh, yes, but there's also you can also train knife fighting and stuff like that. So so there's some details there, and even with guns and stuff um, that can help you, can make you better prepared. Yes. Tito Bandito. You can't limit someone's skill set and then penalize them for not having the right skill set. Um, the game is flawed from the start. The street has one rule: put the other down. Sport wins trophies. All right. Okay, so then Ben Franklin. Oh, I agree. Yeah, there's some cool knife techniques and stuff, and also for guns and stuff. So, but again, yeah, gun. You know, like you have to be close to the person to do any of these cool disarming techniques and stuff. So, there's a lot that goes into that type of scenario where you're going to be scared, and you actually kind of have to lure someone close to you with the gun. So there's different things you have to be prepared for, right? So which, you're not going to be learning in your average even catch wrestling or jiu-jitsu class or collegiate wrestling class. That's not the goal of these types of classes, right? So it would be good to maybe take, if you're interested in that type of thing, it'd be good to maybe like spend the time to learn about that, right? I'm sure that Tactical Casey would be happy to show some stuff, and but also, yeah, there's, depending on where you are, I mean, there should be some kinds of like self-defense training stuff that are maybe a little bit more advanced. If you're already like a good higher level martial artist, then yeah, it would be good to maybe add some of these like more sophisticated self-defense classes that are beyond just like kicking someone in the groin or whatever, or eye gouging and stuff. Um, so that might be something to think about. So, that being said, I do feel like, say, like the striking version, that kind of gives you a little bit more of a wider, um, like a better base, right? To fight back or to add the self defense techniques, is the Chinese kickboxing. It's called Sanda. So that's one of the other styles I teach. Um, so so like these styles, so the catch wrestling and the Sanda, they it's not just, so like Sanda's not just striking only, right? Not just knees and kicks and punches and elbows. It also has a lot of takedowns, a lot of clinch work and stuff like that. So same thing with catch wrestling. You start standing, and it has a lot of even standing takedowns, and these different things that if you take time to learn them, you can get that edge over your opponents, whether it be like even doing no-gi competition, or like how the original point of the video that I shared with you guys, talking about a street fight, right? Between amateur wrestling and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, right? So that's my point, right? So, Tactical Casey, oh my god, thank you for the shout out. Oh, you're very welcome. Robot Jocks, what do you think about a catch wrestling gi? Um, I would not think about that because it's just not what we do. I think someone was trying to do something like that, right? Like they're trying to do gi competitions, but it's like just do jujitsu. Ben Franklin, Sanda and Kudo Karate. Good luck finding that. Are pretty good. Either way, the more tools you have in your toolbox, the better. Correct, correct. It's kind of weird. But I did run into this guy who was a Kudo instructor from Japan, and he because I was teaching at this one jujitsu school many years ago, and the guy came because he felt like the black belt of that school was really good, so he wanted to spend time uh, taking my class, but also spend time studying or like improving his jujitsu skill. And but yeah, this guy came from Japan, and he was like one of the like more well known guys. So I had a chance to not only meet him but spar with him and stuff too. So I would agree. Yeah, it's a little bit more well rounded. So along the lines of Sanda. So yeah, totally agree. But yeah, it's like if I think I met this person because I'm in Los Angeles. So, we get a lot of people coming here from around the world. And that might not be the case where everyone else who might be listening or watching this, you might not live in a place where it's considered like a martial arts hub. So, so good luck finding, like you said, like what Ben Franklin said, good luck finding that. Um, but yeah, it doesn't mean that you can't. Actually, that's one of the good things about YouTube. You can at least find some videos to get some examples, right? um at least you can kind of see it see it happening and in real time, whether it be actually, hopefully it can be like some cool um like cool pro sanda videos on my other channel, the Kung Fu Culture. I did put up some pro matches, and I think there was one against like sanda versus uh like shoot whichever shoot one was like more sport or more not sport but more kickboxing oriented. But then yeah, there's a bunch against Muay Thai and like a few other kickboxing events. um so you can kind of see Sanda in the wild, right? One cool thing is that like the coach, like one of the winningest coaches for Sanda, he was my coach when I trained in China. So he ended up training a lot of the really cool and a really popular, more successful Sanda fighters. And I was lucky enough to be trained, or at least to spend the summer training with him. So, um, oh, and yeah, and so there, right. The other thing would be, so I just want to let you guys know, um, feel free to keep asking questions or making comments. Um, Sanda, so Golden Slugger. Sanda is just Muay Thai without knees and elbows. Not really. It actually has a wider variety of strikes and grappling, right? Which Muay Thai has rudimentary grappling, right? And so maybe they'll have some kick catching or whatever, but it's more rudimentary compared to Sanda. Um, so want to recap about the whole thing where it's like I'm happy that Ummah Fight Camp mentions catch wrestling and then gives the edge to catch wrestling in a street fight, especially against jiu-jitsu and probably over amateur wrestling because of the whole presence of the wrestling aspects and the submission aspects. Also, um, I wanted to recap about I'll be teaching at UCLA, both Sanda and catch wrestling starting next month. All right. So if anybody if you happen to be a UCLA student, you automatically have membership to the John Wooden Center. That's the gym on campus, but it's a public university, so anybody can join that gym, and then you'd be able to work out there. So they have great equipment, like cardio equipment, weights, squat racks, all that stuff. It's really good. And then you can join my class. You can also become a member of this channel. I've been trying to put more videos for everyone there at every tier level. So that would be great to help out the channel. So we can keep like doing events, and hopefully we can be back doing events at UCLA, because that's our first event was held there at UCLA. So hopefully we can get back and do more there. Ben Franklin. You'd be surprised by how much a fight changes when certain things are taken out or added, like headbutts. Wrestlers used a lot of headbutts in the guard in the older UFC stuff. Yeah, exactly. And this is, I think, most evident in amateur wrestling, where um, a lot of these things that a lot of times are just called potentially dangerous, right? Then once something is identified as potentially dangerous, then it gets removed from a lot of the amateur wrestling rules. Um, so then the game, like the focus changes. So like the whole game changes, right? And so then it becomes, or it evolves further and further away from the original version, right? So um, yeah, so I think that's a good thing that Ben Franklin pointed out. Ben Franklin, he's so wise, so wise. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. And so yeah, even in for MMA, things have changed, and I think I've mentioned him before. So the guy who coined the actual guy who coined the term MMA, his name is John Peretti. He talks about how in order to make MMA become more mainstream or more accepted, he actually was the one that helped to create maybe what people might not like, but he helped make it more palatable by creating a lot of the rules and the proper gloves and the ring, or like the round system that they have. So maybe people might not like that, where it's like, just let him go and have no time limit or whatever. But John was saying that in order to make it more palatable and more acceptable, you kind of had to make it more like resemble what people understand, or like what the mainstream audience might understand. So that's kind of what what's what you're seeing, or what you saw, where it's like it was more raw, right? Or like less rules at the original events, and then now it's much more structured today. Robot Jocks, do you have a mixed catch and sanda class? Well, they're back to back, so Monday, Wednesday, starting I believe at 5, so 5 and 6 o'clock, so you can stay for both hours. Yeah. So, again, everyone's welcome to join that gym. Um, and then once you join, um, then you would have to register. But I believe they have like a package where they have like a grappling package. So if you pay a small fee, then you can take all the grappling classes, which I think is pretty cool because they, of course, they have jujitsu and all that. All right, let me look up. So Ben Franklin asked uh, what John Peretti's last name is, or how to spell it. Let me see if I think it's just like Peretti, like Peretti. Something, it'd be I think like the Italian way you would spell it, Peretti. So, yeah, because he wrote a book a few years ago, so I think it might be easy to do a search. Let me see, John Peretti. John Peretti, maybe do MMA. Yeah, John Peretti. He's done a bunch of interviews. Yeah, so it's Peretti, and he's done a lot of interviews for on No Holds Barred with Eddie Goldman. He's like a regular guest. So he talks about the old days in MMA. He became the matchmaker for UFC. Yeah, John Peretti. Wait, yeah, Perr. He's not really active on social media anymore since 2019. Hopefully he's still alive, but I haven't seen him post any. Yeah, because I would see him on social media, but I haven't seen him post anything in a while, but big pressure jujitsu. How much training have you done in Wigan? Well, I was part of the first like we would say the cohort. I was like part of the first group of people accepted into their training program when they started doing catch wrestling again. And then I would go back every year for 5 years and train and compete with them. And then I brought Roy Wood over to the United States to participate at our events here in Los Angeles and also in Iowa. And he would do like special trainings with us here in our studio as well. So I think I've done a lot of training with them, especially with Roy Wood, also with Billy Robinson. And so you can find all that online. Right. Ben Franklin, awesome. Thank you. Found him. Okay, cool. Yeah, he John Parada came out with a book, and he kind of documents the early days, but his interviews are pretty interesting too. He's not really apologetic about his points of view on the old days, because they I think they try to erase him from history because he's not necessarily the nice. I'm not saying the nicest, but he exposes a lot of the injustices or like the erroneous things that that were done, not only like to the sport and all that. So he, it's something he loved too. So that he helped build. Big pressure jujitsu. That's awesome. Much respect. Oh, thank you for watching. Thanks for your support. Big pressure jujitsu. All right, so we're almost at an hour. So let's go ahead and maybe end it here. I really want to thank everyone for Ben Franklin. Yeah, John Parada doesn't play nice with others. He's very outspoken, but ultimately, it's like he loves martial arts. So that is obvious. That's obvious. All right. All right, so let's go ahead and end it here. Thank you very much. Consider becoming a member, or if you're not near Los Angeles or South Carolina with John Strickland in American Hook Wrestling, you can join the Catch Wrestling Alliance Academy. That's on our website, the catchwrestlingalliance.com. You can always join our online program. Or you can become a member of this channel. We really appreciate it. And so thank you for helping us to keep real wrestling alive.